It takes about 2 minutes to go live. Sorry, my laptop is too old. Okay, we are live. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Karwaan, the Heritage Exploration Initiative. My name is Ishan Sharma, and this is the fourth Karwaan special lecture of 2025. And I think this is also a very special day because today we are also going to release the shortlist of the Karwaan Book Award 2024. So, five books that would make the cut to the award and would finally win. One of that would win the award on the 8th of February 2025 on YouTube, that the award will be announced. So today the fourth lecture will be delivered by one of the most interesting, most amazing, brilliant art historians, a specialist in Islamic art, Dr. Mika Natif, who is joining us from George Washington University. She is currently an associate professor of art history and director of graduate studies. Her focus is on intercultural exchanges and global connections that Muslim societies forged with the European sphere. During the pre-modern period, her primary field of research is Islamic paintings with special interest in Central Asia, Iran, India, and the Mediterranean. Her recently published book was Mughal Occidentalism, Artistic Encounters Between Europe and Asia at the Courts of India from 1580s to 1630s. And her current research explores notions of images, diversity, and religious tolerance in the arts of Mughal India, female portraiture, and the role of women as patrons and artists in the pre modern Persianate spheres. She also co edited and co authored with Francesca Leoni on Eros and Sexuality in Islamic Art, that came out in 2013. And she's currently working on a book dedicated to the life, portraits, and patronage of Hamida Banu Begam, on which she'll deliver today's lecture, titled Women at the Mughal Courts: Image, Portrait, and Patronage of Hamida Banu Begam, 1527 to 1604. And to moderate this session, the Q&A, we have our very own Chandni Jaswal, the core team member and currently the editor of Karwaan, the Heritage Exploration Initiative. She recently completed her master's in history from Punjab University, where she secured a gold medal in her undergraduate history degree. As a core team member of Karwaan and a communication member of the Museum of British Colonialism, UK Kenya, Jaswal is deeply involved in heritage and historical research. Her research focuses on subcontinental history with a particular emphasis on women's studies in early modern India through the lens of art history. She has presented her research at prestigious conferences, including the New York Conference on Asian Studies and the Indian Association for South Asian Studies, as well as postgraduate workshops at the universities of Oxford, Cambridge, Cornell, York, and Leeds. And I think she is the most decorated of all of us at Karwaan here, the most interested in art history. So we are thankful to Chani for agreeing to do this, and more importantly, to Dr. Natif for agreeing to do this. Now, over to Dr. Natif for the lecture and Chani. Thank you.
So, good morning from Washington, D.C., and let me share my screen with you. So, thank you, Ishan Sharma, for this wonderful invitation to be part of Karwaan, and also to Chandni Jaswal for monitoring the session today. I would like to dedicate my lecture to the late Kavita Singh, an extraordinary scholar, colleague, and dear friend, whose contributions to our field continue to inspire us all. Today's talk is focusing on my forthcoming book, which explores the images, life, and patronage of Hamida Banu Begam, who was the mother of Emperor Akbar and one of the wives of Humayun, the second Mughal ruler. Hamida Banu emerged as the most prominent and influential woman in northern India of her era, and she is portrayed in several times in court-produced pictures. But surprisingly, academic books on paintings of Mughal ladies are sparse, to put it mildly, even though it is already 2025. As I was working on Mughal Occidentalism, I started noticing numerous depictions of royal women in court commission album paintings and illustrated official court chronicles. Yet, strikingly, no one seemed to be saying much about them, with very few exceptions. Most of the time, these depicted women were left unidentified. On the rare occasion that they were named, the focus was almost always on the artist, a man, or the male figure in the composition, while the woman next to him was all but ignored. Scholars had, quite simply, overlooked these images of women. This realization led me to dig deeper, searching for any information available about Mughal women in visual arts. Over the past century, there have been very few scholarly publications on this subject. Even fewer adopt an art historical approach. One could count them on a single hand. At this point, I think it is essential to acknowledge the groundbreaking contributions of scholars who have worked on Mughal women. Most of these works are either one-off articles or focused on primarily on patronage. It is their contributions that showed me what was possible. And a lot is possible. As you can see, Hamida Banu appears in 9 Mughal paintings. They are made by artists linked to or affiliated with the royal courts, and all but one were created when she was alive. So, what is important about this material? And what is at stakes in reevaluating Hamida Banu's cultural and political contributions for us today? Why should we be interested? Hamida Banu's visual representations reveal to us her public responsibilities, administrative functions, and persona in ways that written sources do not. On an individual level, they allow us to see her distinct experience of an elite woman and the ways in which she navigated her unique position within the Mughal courts. On a macro level, her constructed images tell us a layered, complex, and nuanced history of the Mughal Empire at that time. Yet, it is important to note that Hamida Banu's life and images do not represent the experiences of all Mughal women, the majority of whom remain undocumented. Nevertheless, her portrayals and patronage provide valuable insights indicative of gender possibilities within a patriarchal culture. Let me tell a little bit about her life, and then I'd like to discuss some of her depicted images which appear on the screen. She was born around 1527 to a Sunni Khorasani family at the service of the Timurids. Her father, named Ali Akbar, also known as Mir Baba Dost, was a religious teacher to Mirza Hindal, who was Babur's youngest son. Her family is related to Sheikh Ahmed of Jam, like Humayun's mother, Begam. She meets Emperor Humayun at Hindal's camp, and he notices her at a banquet given in his honor. He starts inquiring about her family and her character, and then proposes to marry her. Following his proposal, they start a long negotiation, a kind of an interesting back and forth that lasted 40 days, in which she negotiated her position and possibly also her dowry and things of that nature. Once Humayun convinces her to join him in matrimony, they wed in 1541. At this stage, it is worth mentioning that she was not his first, not his favorite wife. But within a couple of decades, she became the highest-ranking female figure in the empire. It is during this unstable political period of constant movement from place to place that Hamida, under very difficult circumstances, gives birth to baby Akbar at Omarkot in 1542. Shortly after, Humayun makes the decision to escape northern India and take refuge at the Safavid realm because he was losing territories, power, and support. Hamida then resolves to flee to Iran with Humayun and leaves infant Akbar with a small group of close, loyal persons. They will protect him with their lives. While in Safavid Iran, she meets with Shah Tahmasp and his influential sister, Shahzadeh Sultanam, also known as Mahin Banu, and the two women forge a close connection, and Hamida leaves a long-lasting impression at the Persian court. When Humayun proceeds to Kabul after his victories, the emperor left Hamida Banu in charge of the entire household and the bagage. Arriving from Kandahar in the spring of 1546, Hamida joined Humayun and the rest of the family for the ceremony of Akbar's circumcision. It is somewhere around this time that she begins to collect and also commission manuscripts. From historical sources, we learn that she was overseeing Akbar's education and that his lessons took place at her tent. Not surprising, then, that Hamida Banu was already collecting books in those years, as attested by her seal stamps, which bear the Hijri date of 957, which is 1550 to 1551. So we know that she was literate and educated. But in early 1556, Emperor Humayun dies suddenly, and Akbar ascends the throne at the age of 14. This is when Hamida Banu assumes a much more visible and active role in the political as well as cultural arenas of the empire. She receives the epithet Maria Makani, she who is equal to Mary in rank, from Emperor Akbar at some point during his reign, and we're not sure exactly when. Following Turco-Mongol custom, Hamida draws her legitimacy for pursuing political power and influence from her status as both the royal widow and the mother of the emperor. Primary sources reveal that she was consulted on matters of military campaigns, policy changes, and international affairs, offering her opinions, wisdoms, and relentless support. She dies in 1604 in Agra at the old age of 77 or so, and was buried at Humayun's mausoleum in Delhi. And just as a side note, Akbar passed away 10 months after her, so the two were really connected. Hamida Banu's role in the administration, especially under Akbar, was multifaceted and unwavering. Several times, Akbar relied on her to act as his proxy and take over his possessions and position as the head of the capital and central provinces when he went on campaigns to crush rebellions. Father Montserrat, who was a member of the Jesuit embassy to the Mughal court, reports that in the late 1570s, Akbar left Fatehpur Sikri for Kabul to subdue the insurrection of Mirza Hakim. The king's mother was put in charge of the capital and the entire Delhi province. She also had 12,000 cavalries directly under her command. Her leadership and oversight guaranteed the orderly governance of the empire, which freed the emperor to pursue his military ambitions. It is likely that for the same reason, when the royal ladies went on a Hajj to Mecca in 1576, Hamida Banu stayed in Fatehpur Sikri because she was needed at the court, as Rubilal suggests. Akbar depended on her so much for the smooth running of the state that she could not relinquish her responsibilities, not even for performing the Hajj. Hamida Banu 9's pictures represent the breadth of her roles and visual persona. Today, I want to focus on one particular aspect of her imagery, and that is her representation as Padshah Begam, the queen consort and sub-ruler with Emperor Akbar. Looking at the ways she was depicted in Mughal court chronicles, carefully studying her visual images, while also analyzing primary sources, allowed me to understand that Hamida Banu served as a co-ruler to her son. She was not fully equal to the emperor in her status and rank, but came rather close. Using the following 3 examples as my case study, I demonstrate how the Mughal artists meticulously constructed images of her that reflected and projected her special status. The first painting shows Hamida Banu sharing a space of power with Emperor Humayun. The second picture displays the way Emperor Akbar approached her as an official ruler. And in the last case study, she appears as a fully fledged Padshah Begam, as an emperor. Except for one, all the paintings that I'm showing today with Hamida Banu's images were done during her own lifetime and by artists working for royal patrons. They represent events that portrayed in Mughal illustrated manuscripts of court chronicles. When we look at these historical paintings, it is worth noting that these are official court documents, commissioned and produced at the Mughal courts, and that they convey retrospective interpretations of the past and constructed views of historical affairs and figures. This illustration was originally part of an Akbarnameh manuscript, narrating the history of Akbar. But at some point, unfortunately, it was detached from its original and pasted onto a different text page, and this is what you see on the left. In the center of the composition, we see Emperor Humayun with Hamida Banu on his right. The scene depicts a moment of testing and divine confirmation related to Akbar's childhood. And so the story goes. Following their 2 years of sheltering in Safavid Iran, Emperor Humayun recovered his power and reconquered Kabul in 1545. When entering the city, he was reunited with family and his toddler child Akbar, who was left as a newborn with a group of close confidants. Upon Humayun's success and victorious comeback, Hamida Banu arrived at Kabul several months later in the following spring. Before mother and son meet again, Humayun decided to devise a test to see if young Akbar would recognize his mother after a period of separation. The emperor ordered a princely celebration and instructed that Hamida Banu should come with the other ladies and assimilate into the crowd. The court historian Abul Fazl tells us that, and I quote, "She sat in the imperial presence without any distinction or recognition. Young Akbar was told to find his mother among the court ladies, and by divine light, with no mistake or error, he went straight to her and sat in her lap." End of quote. The artists depicted this dramatic moment of recognition and the reunion between mother and child. The picture shows the toddler running towards Hamida Banu with open arms as she is about to embrace him. Humayun, on the right, affectionately touches his son's arm while exchanging gazes with his wife. Seated on a raised platform in a pavilion, the royal family is enclosed in a private quarters and surrounded by court women, while the men are admiring the child's wisdom from outside. As the painting draws attention to Hamida Banu, the Akbarnameh narrative focuses on young Akbar and his spiritual, almost miraculous abilities to identify his mother after they were apart for a couple of years. The test that Humayun concocted was an affirmation and display of his son's divine instruction, as Abul Fazl explains. However, the painting shifts the focal point to Hamida Banu, who catches the viewer's eye in her short-sleeved yellow overcoat. Even though Abul Fazl tells us that she was supposed to blend in with the other ladies, In the illustration, Hamida Banu's figure is easily discernible. In comparison to the portrayal of other court ladies aligned on each side of the royal family, Hamida Banu is significantly larger. She sits next to the emperor on the same platform and at the same level, clearly separated from the elite entourage of women cohort. While the Akbarnameh text emphasizes masculine control, in return, the artists take license to depict a mother and child acting in tandem. As much as Akbar is a core player in the written story, the visual representation of Hamida Banu occupies a central place in the composition. This illustration is more of a statement on her position among the royal women, her standing with Humayun, and her status as Walida, the mother of the heir apparent, and not solely about professing the child's divine character. Adding another layer of viewing, it is possible that the artists delineated Hamida Banu's image as if seeing her through Akbar's eyes, as the outstanding chosen woman that she was, whom Abul Fazl describes as having the divine light shining from her forehead and brow. Establishing her prominence in position, the artists rendered an evocative reinterpretation of past events that emphasize Hamida Banu's presence, which begs the question regarding her agency vis-a-vis her images. From a wider perspective, her positioning in this illustration recalls Mongol pictorial scenes where the Khan shares the space of power, the throne, with his chief Khatun, queen. Similar to Hamida and Humayun, the Mongol couple on the right is surrounded by their family, courtiers, and attendants. Turning slightly towards each other, their gazes cross, and they seem to be almost at the same size, with only minute differences regarding their scale in the composition. Like Humayun and Hamida, the Khan is depicted a touch larger and taller than his queen, and he occupies a little bit more space on the throne than she does. Hence, the Khatun's power and status is visibly recognized in the painting, even though she is not equal to the Khan. We know from Mongol and Ilkhanid historical sources that some women received official titles and held formal positions in the Mongol Empire. Hence, the depictions of Mongol chief wives sharing the throne space with the Khan can be linked to her official functions and responsibilities. So, does this translate to Hamida Banu's representations? In other words, can we read her depiction, her scale, her placement next to Humayun, as a deliberate, retrospective acknowledgement of her status and sociopolitical influence? Does the visual language here reinforce her significance, not just as a consort or mother, but as an active participant in the political and cultural landscape of the Mughal court? To emphasize this idea, I'd like to bring an example from the Timurids, who were the Mughals' paternal ancestors. The painting on the right shows an official reception scene with Ulugh Beg, Timur's grandson, sitting in a small tent while his wives appear diagonally and below him. The royal women do not share the elevated space under the canopy with Ulugh Beg. So clearly, the Mughal artists and patrons are not taking their visual cue from their Timurid ancestors on this matter. Just in parenthesis, there is another painting from the Zafarnameh that shows Timur with another royal woman, and they are sitting relatively closely but further away or apart than what we see with Hamida and Humayun. So there are mixed idioms here. As far as we know from primary sources, in spite of Hamida Banu's duties and profound involvement in state affairs, she did not obtain an official title, which would be the norm for men performing similar tasks. Even though many Mughal ladies acted de facto in various roles, like governors, chief advisor, or envoys, they did not get the institutional recognition for the functions that they performed. Hamida Banu was no exception. As Anne Lambton states, and I quote, "Their influence was personal and not institutionalized," end of quote. The lack of an official administrative title for Hamida Banu and other Mughal ladies in the state bureaucracy has acute ramifications. It blunts our ability to discuss her role in the empire and recognize the numerous contributions to the state in the same way that we measure the achievements of Mughal men. However, the gravitas of Hamida Banu's deeds and actions forces us to acknowledge her as one of the most essential royal persons to take on a key position in the making of the Mughal dynasty. And this is where visual sources come to play a groundbreaking role. Following several successful military campaigns in 1557, Akbar asked the royal ladies who were stationed in Kabul to join him in India. When the women reached the vicinity of Mankot, the emperor came out to greet them. The painting portrays this reunion between Hamida Banu and her son, which the Akbarnameh defines as a moment of jubilation and excitement. Several elements in this illustration render Hamida Banu's image parallel to that of a male sovereign. The space she occupies in the composition, Akbar's gesture towards her, and the inclusion of court rituals. For the sake of time and clarity, I'd like to concentrate on the attributes related to court etiquette and customs. In the painting, Hamida Banu sits in a red palanquin, howdah, raised off the ground and carried by 4 men. She is clearly the focal point of the composition. As Emperor Akbar approaches her humbly from the lower right side of the painting, he bows forward, putting the right hand to his forehead, performing the Cornish salutation. According to Mughal official history, Akbar established the Cornish as part of his court etiquette, and I quote, "His Majesty has commanded the palm of the right hand placed upon the forehead and the head to be bent downwards," end of quote. This mode of salutation exemplifies the display of respect and obedience to a ruling king. The detail on the left from an Akbarname illustration shows the surrender of Itimad Khan Gujrati after his loss to Akbar's forces. With a gold turban on his head, the subjugated emir bends down while placing the right hand on his forehead, succumbing to the emperor. What the artists delineate in both paintings is not the greeting between equals, but rather the submission of one person to another. And in our case, on the right, of Akbar to Hamida Banu. Interestingly, nowhere in the text does Abul Fazl mentions that emperor performed the Cornish before his mother. The emperor's formal yielding to her was further captured by Abul Fazl, who concludes that, and I quote, "everything that lady says is granted by the emperor," end of quote. The artists created a picture that goes much farther and deeper than capturing a common gesture performed by royal offsprings toward their parents. Linda Leach notices the unusual subject matter of the painting and some discrepancies between text and image regarding Akbar's age. She states that the young emperor looks much older in the picture than the 15 years old that he is supposed to be when the event took place. Leach explains the inconsistency as a result of an inexperienced artist named Dhanraj, who is credited with making this painting. However, we have few Akbarname illustrations that show the emperor as an adolescent ruler. And this example on the left is from a slightly earlier copy of the Akbarname. Hence, representing a youthful Akbar should not have been an issue. Based on our knowledge of work practices and the various stages of scrutiny, review, and approval during the procedure of production of royal manuscripts, it is hard to believe that a single artist would have been responsible for such a gross mistake. Instead, I would like to suggest that the change in Akbar's age in the composition occurred not because of an oversight, but rather because it better reflected and suited the contemporary relationship between Hamida Banu and her son when the painting was depicted and created. In Dhanraj's picture, Akbar bows before his mother, but Hamida Banu stands aloof. Perhaps the reason why she remains distant is because her figure was intended to symbolize a visual idiom related to the genre of Jaroka Darshan portraits. This iconography is linked to court ritual of viewing the emperor from a balcony or a window. Jaroka Darshan portraits usually show the ruler from the waist up, in profile, framed in a window with a parapet below and a canopy above, very much like the image of Hamida Banu seeing through the opening in her red howdah, though she is separated by a delicate screen. In his account of court ceremonies, the unofficial Mughal historian Badauni remarks that when the emperor entered the Jaroka balcony, and I quote, "the whole crowd prostrated themselves," end of quote. This same reaction is depicted by the painter Dharam Daj, who shows Akbar and his retinue yielding upon seeing Hamida Banu through the howdah's meshed window. Here, the large convoy of royal ladies and families of Akbar's loyal soldiers play the role of spectators and witnesses, standing in a semicircle around the two protagonists. This painting may provide an early reflection of a practice later associated with Nur Jahan. As Jahangir's co-sovereign, she held court from the Jaroka, seated behind a finely crafted latticed screen, while nobles gathered to offer their salutation, a practice discussed by Najaf Haidar. As Farmoin talks about the royal appearance and viewing as the emperor's sovereign's performance, a carefully staged show of power. In this picture, Hamida Banu takes on that role in front of Akbar, his retinue, the other royal women, and their entourage, making the whole idea of performative sovereignty come to life. Hence, her image is rife with imperial symbolism. Such a portrayal establishes the link between the imperial ceremonies, court etiquette, and Hamida Banu's rendition as the Padshah Begam, the commanding royal female figure. In our last case study, Hamida Banu appears as a fully fledged sovereign par excellence, seated on a golden throne. The picture was painted about 16 years after her passing, which occurred in 1604. Here, she's portrayed in a busy postnatal scene of her grandson, Prince Salim, the future Emperor Jahangir. What prompted the artists working for Emperor Jahangir to depict his late grandmother with such overt symbols of sovereignty? And what deeper insights can we glean about Hamida Banu from this portrayal? The picture was an illustration to the court chronicles Jahangirname, or the Tuzuki Jahangiri, written by the emperor himself. His birth took place at Sikri, at the house of the old Sheikh Salim Chishti, in 1569. According to Jahangir, when the time of birth drew near, his mother, Mariam Zamani, and I quote, was sent in perfect belief and sincerity to the Sheikh's house, end of quote. When Jahangir describes his own nativity, he does not allude to any of the royal ladies other than his own mother. However, the artists rendered his postnatal painting as a dense group portrait in which Hamida Banu sits triumphantly on a golden European chair in front of the birth mother, Mariam Zamani. On the left, kneeling on the lush carpet, is who I believe to be Salima Sultan Begam, Akbar's chief wife. In spite of displaying a collective approach to the royal ladies, the picture is studded with individualized-looking portraits of high-ranking women at the court, creating a sense of attestation. The performance of validation afforded by the senior-most ladies is a novelty that is absent from early depictions of the prince's postnatal pictures in royal Akbarname manuscripts. And on the right, you see an example from an Akbarname illustration in which you see the birth mother, Mother Mariam Zamani, reclining on a low bed, and she's surrounded by maids and attendants, but none of the royal ladies are there. Such notion of testimony in this picture rests in artistic and ideological claims of dynastic descent through Hamida Banu and matrilineal genealogies. And like a genealogical tree or diagram, the composition convenes 3 generations of the royal family on a single page. The artist, in a clear display of status, though one that is hierarchical, shows Hamida Banu sitting on a golden throne-like seat. Then there is the image of Jahangir's aristocratic Indian mother, but her full body is obstructed by a narrow pole. In fact, we cannot look at one without seeing the other, which creates a sense of a matrilineal continuity and prestige. Illustrated genealogies and court annals were used politically and socially to promote dynastic affiliation and ideology as visual proof of sovereignty, as Corinne Lefebvre demonstrated. Shifting from the collective representation of lineage to her individual portraiture, this post-mortem representation of Hamida Banu offers more physiognomic traits than her earlier Akbarname depictions painted when she was alive. The main artist, probably Bishandas, subtly rendered her senior age, external feature, and internal strong character. Poised and in control, it is no wonder that in this portrayal, she assumes the same pose, affluent details, and commanding aura as the emperor himself. Holding a string of pearls, ruby, and emerald beads in her right hand, while elegantly gesturing with her left, she echoes Jahangir's formal body language. But unlike him, Hamida Banu is shown in 3/4 view. Resting her bare feet on a red and gold cushion, Hamida Banu assumes an imperial position similar to the way the Mughal Padshah is represented. The artists of this folio envisioned her in this ultimate pose of a ruler on a throne, offering a visual record for Jahangir's memory. Perhaps the impetus behind the painters bestowing such honors upon Hamida Banu was the unique bond and history that the emperor shared with his late paternal grandmother. Hamida Banu fostered her connection with her grandson since he was a young prince, protected him, and intervened between Akbar and his rebellious son several times. She became a trustworthy mediator for both, sheltering Jahangir from his father's wrath when tensions arose. In the late 1590s to early 1600s, at the height of father and son conflict, it was again Hamida Banu who was the conduit and arbitrator between them. When Jahangir asked to reconcile with his father, It was in the safe haven of Hamida Banu's quarters that the meeting took place. Her interventions may have been driven by an array of reasons, some of which possibly set by personal affection for her grandson. Other reasons may have been motivated by her desire to exercise power at the process of king-making, or because she wanted to safeguard the lineage and preserve the empire. Like some Turco-Mongol Persianate elite women before her, Hamida Banu was deeply involved in the political development and careers of her offsprings. And much like in the Darbar scenes, we see a carefully structured hierarchical arrangement of figures: royal women, court ladies, musicians, and entertainers positioned on the right and left of Hamida Banu as she sits on the throne. This composition immediately evokes formal receptions and ceremonies of Mughal court, where every person had a designated place, determined by their rank, status, and role. Now, if we turn to the Darbar scene on the right, painted around the same time, it portrays Emperor Jahangir on the throne with a similarly tiered arrangement of figures. This parallel draws attention to the shared compositional strategy, while also emphasizing Hamida Banu's centrality and prominence within the visual and political dynastic framework. Hence the reason why Hamida Banu appears sitting on a throne like an emperor is because Jahangir considered her as such. The artists purposefully depicted her legacy and projected her power as sub-ruler to Akbar, as I believe that she was indeed co-ruling with her son. The painters who created this picture for Jahangir understood Hamida Banu's position and were attuned to Jahangir's recognition of his grandmother's power and status. This is why she was portrayed in such a manner, as the Padshah Begam that she was. The three paintings of Hamida Banu that we analyzed today were created by different artists who intentionally highlight her role as a sub-sovereign. This analysis is significant and has the potential to transform our understanding of Mughal history and art of the period. It challenges long-standing assumptions about the portrayal of Mughal women and establishes Hamida Banu as a precursor to Nur Jahan's reign. As much as these pictures offer an internal glimpse into the matrilineal priorities of the Mughal elite at the time, Hamida Banu extended her experience and influence on the international stage as well. Earlier in her life, she accompanied Humayun to his escape to the Safavid court. Her presence in Iran seems to have left a lasting impression on Shah Tahmasp and his sister. Hamida Banu's reputation increased during Akbar's reign, so much so that the Shah himself sent her a diplomatic letter, most likely delivered by his envoy Said Beg Safavi in 1562. In the letter, the Shah appealed Hamida Banu to maintain the status quo regarding Kandahar. According to Zili and reiterated by Yasmin, This document is unprecedented for its period, as we do not know of another instance in which a reigning sovereign of one state sends an official letter to the mother of the emperor of a reigning country. And by the way, the Akbarnameh also reports of a second official letter from the Safavid court by Shah Abbas I, and it arrives in 1604, but Hamida Banu already passed away, so she does not get it. These diplomatic correspondences indicate the grand impact that Hamida Banu had on the ruling Safavid elite, as the Iranian court continued to value her opinion and consider her presence in their dealings with the Mughal Empire. I would like to end my talk with an anecdote that perfectly demonstrates who Hamida Banu was and her relationship with her son, Emperor Akbar. In 1604, as Akbar was on his way to Allahabad to take control of his disobedient son, Prince Salim, word came down that Hamida Banu was ill and that the emperor should immediately return to the capital. But Akbar didn't believe it, saying that his mother was faking her illness. Ironically, she was very sick and died shortly after. Akbar's reaction seems unusual. Why would he dismiss the news like that? It is likely that this was not the first time that Hamida Banu coerced him in such a manner. As this passage reveals, she had no qualms employing manipulative tactics to intervene in military campaigns she opposed, even if her advice was initially ignored by the emperor. This event illustrates her conspicuous involvement in state affairs and the audacity of her actions. Even more surprising is the fact that her bold maneuvers were tolerated and accepted by other members of the court. It is also worth noting that the only reason we hear about this incident is because in this particular case, she was indeed unwell and passed away. How many times did she pull a similar trick, which court chronicles did not report? This is but one example of the difficulty of Mughal primary sources and the significance of visual evidence. Hamida Banu's images offer rich and complex visual insights into her multifaceted roles, which were crucial to the empire's stability and success. As the highest ranking and most esteemed female figure in a patriarchal court, her depictions go beyond mere representations, symbolizing her political, cultural, and maternal impact. Hamida Banu's images offer a nuanced lens through which to understand her contributions to Akbar and Jahangir's reigns. These depictions not only celebrate her virtues, but also reflect her status as a central figure in a male-dominated political and cultural legacy of the empire. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Natif, for this path-breaking work on the life of Hamida Banu Begum. For those of us who are interested in Mughal art and Mughal history in general, we know that any biographical account of Hamida Banu Begum, a queen mother, is unheard of. So we're eagerly looking forward to the book. We have a couple of questions, ma'am, and in the interest of time, we'll be taking about two. This question is from Dr. Neha Vermani. She asks, she thanks you for the talk and asks, maybe barring a couple, why do you think we don't have paintings or visual depictions of Noor Jahan from the 17th century, considering that she was a co-sovereign with Jahangir?
That's a really, really important question. Well, we have one painting that was done by one of the court artists that is in Rampur. It's a beautifully incredible portrait of Noor Jahan with a musket and really exemplifies her perfectly. And I was wondering about this issue myself, and I don't know the answer to it yet because I think we need to look into that. Maybe things will come up. My experience is usually when you start looking, you will find more things than you expect. But the other point is perhaps because of her difficult history later on with Shah Jahan and the kind of tensions at the court, her image did not survive in the same way that others have. And so maybe it is because these images are so political, they are also then subjected to the painful history and consequences that their figures are suffering from. So perhaps there is a destruction or an elimination or just mere chance that these did not survive. I don't know. I think if anyone is interested to start working on this, this would be a wonderful topic to think about.
Thank you, Mika. I did have a question, so I'll use the chair's privilege here and ask a few questions of my own. Just before the talk, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Natif very kindly gave me a few minutes of her time, and we were talking about the depiction of women. And Dr. Natif, what I found quite uncanny was the fact that Mahamanga, who is a milk mother or a wet nurse, when she is rendered in that painting that we saw from her son's wedding, she's drawn in the same yellow color as Hamida Banu Begum in other paintings, or drawn in the similar strokes. Is the painter trying to give the birth mother and the milk mother the same status? Is this the way to show respect to Mahamanga, or maybe that she did have a lot of clout in the Mughal court, that she's rendered in the same light as a Mughal queen mother, considering how powerful she was, that we understood from this presentation?
That's a really interesting question. So I am not ready to provide any specific roles for particular colors. So I don't think every time we see yellow, we have to think about it as connected to Hamida Banu Begum because she appears in other colors as well. But I do think that the yellow color is a very in this kind of yellow is meant to catch our eye and to become the focal point of the composition. Mahamanaga was a very important figure for Akbar because she is the one who really gave him the most support then after Bayram Khan's assassination, that we know that Hamida Banu was involved in that as well, if not initiated that. And Mahamanaga and Hamida Banu were connected because of the early years and the relationship to Akbar, and she was probably part of her circle. So the idea of portraying them perhaps possibly in a kind of a reflection of one another is not surprising. Mahamanaga is a really tragic figure, another tragic figure that is not appreciated as much. And even Abul Fazl, who does not give compliments to women too often, talks very, very interestingly about her, saying how brilliant she was, how hard she worked, and how much she did not get the recognition, the official recognition and titles that she was looking for, and she was unhappy about that. She even expressed her unhappiness about this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Natif. We have a question from the audience, and I've got a question. We've got a comment from the acclaimed artist and art scholar Indrapramit Roy ji, and he's thanked you for the talk, and he says it's illuminating. Thank you, Roy, Dr. Roy Saab, for joining our talk. Barira Nabil asks, and actually we're kind of segueing into the question that we reserved for the reel, but I'll ask this question. And he asks, do we have any reference to female Mughal painters in the Mughal atelier? And are there, if I could add a question here, do we have female painters painting women of the court? And how their painting would have been different? So I added a question here. So yeah.
So we know these are great questions. We know at least of 4, if not 5, women painters working for royal patrons during the late Akbar, early Jahangir period, and maybe a little bit during Shah Jahan's. And they are known from signatures and inscriptions on paintings, so they're officially recognized, and there is work in progress on them. So that we know of. That they were directly related to portraits of women or women at the court, the royal court, we don't know that yet. But we also, I believe that we don't fully know to what extent women contributed to the historical illustrated manuscripts at the court. I mean, we know usually the main figures, the 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 main artists that were working on it, but we don't know who else was participated. And it is based on the processes of the production. There were more than 1, 2, or 3 people working on a single work of art. So that is something that we still need to explore, and it would be a great topic to think about and to write about. So anyone for a dissertation. So
Thank you, Dr. Natif. We have a question from Professor Coves, Margaret Coves, and she asks, you presented an illustration from the Mongol court. What is the period? And she's also thinking of connecting it with the illustration of Ulugh Bey and the Khatun from the Mongol period.
So the Mongol illustration that I showed is from around the 1330s, so mid 14th century, and the reason why I'm also bringing it is because the Mughals had a copy of a similar manuscript with similar depictions of the Khans and the Khatuns. This is from the Rashid ad-Din Jami al-Tawarikh, and that's part of and Rampur. The Raza Library in Rampur has a Mughal-Mongol copy of Rashid ad-Din's text with illustrations that are really assimilating and relating to the Mongol ones. And that's one of the reasons why I brought this, is not only because they are connected as ancestors, but also because the Mughals possessed copies of those texts and paintings. So there was a clear awareness of what was going on in the Mongol period.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Natif. As a last question, I know that we've taken enough of your time. So just a quick last question, and that is with regard to Mariam Uz-Zamani, or Jahangir's mother. So we just saw one picture of hers where she's in the background, and we can make out that it's a person of Indian origin because of the color of the skin and the multiple piercings that she's wearing. Do we have any other visual representation of Jahangir's mother? And is she as central in those paintings as Hamida is in these paintings?
Yes. So I think in the painting that I showed of the postnatal scene of Jahangir, she's not, I wouldn't say that she's in the background. She's just a little bit behind Hamida Banu. Hamida Banu is a little bit in front of her on a throne and everything, but Mariam Zamani is definitely there, and she's large in terms of her scale. So it's not that she has disappeared into the background. And in the other postnatal scenes, there are at least 2 of them. In the Akbarname illustrations, she appears similar in pose and in scale to what we see with the other royal women. So no difference there, because I think they're adhering to a different model of the nativity scene of the Virgin Mary for other reasons.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Natif. This brings us to the formal end of the session. We thank everybody on YouTube. We had a huge number of people join us. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining in and for your question. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. We are back in full swing with many more lectures like these. So we hope to see you again. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining in. And of course, thank you very much, Dr. Natif, for this splendid lecture on Hamida Banu Begum. I, for one, can't wait to read the book. I hope that we get to have a copy of this very wonderful book in our hands very soon. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining in. We'll be back with a session tomorrow with Dr. Urvi Khaitan on another aspect of history.